All right, Friday night.
It's Friday night, the Friday night of spring break for us
Oh,
academia in the academic world.
that's right. And still light out.
It's still light out. Hey, did you see the Senate passed that bill to make daylight saving time all the time?
I don't understand it, but so at one point the U.S. had over, and I didn't look this up for this discussion, but I looked this up years ago. We had over 100 time zones,
Yeah,
and so to get down to just a handful of time zones was good, but then to keep this daylight savings is pretty funny. So
yeah. I actually think for triathletes it might be a good thing. You maybe get a little bit more of that sunshine after
yeah,
work. It'll make it tougher for people that get up early
yeah.
and train though. I've got a bike date tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. and it's going to still be dark when we meet.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Like a week ago, it wouldn't have been.
No.
And so it's a kind of a double-edged sword as it comes to the triathlon and training world.
Well, and then this last week, because it's our spring break, I snuck up to St. George, which is another hour time difference and we talked about time zones before, and I don't do well on doing the time zone. So, it was dark until like 8 o'clock in the morning, but then it was light until, 8 o'clock at night. So,
Yeah, it's funny, right? Because like if you're like that chronotype, it really works well for,
yeah,
more the night person.
yeah, yeah. Oh. But it is what it is, and we get through it, and
Yeah.
it's still light, and we're getting more and more hours of light or minutes of light at this point, which is nice.
It is super nice. We're down in Southern California right now, and definitely the beach walking. So we beach walk when we're down here every night,
Yeah,
and it's nice when it's still 6 o'clock and you can go for a beach walk. When we were here at Thanksgiving, it was like 4:30. It's been dark and
yeah.
makes it a short day.
Well, that's nice. I think you're having a little better weather than when I went up to St. George. It was windy and cold.
One of the funny thing is when we booked this, my preference was to go to St. George.
Uh-huh.
And I really wanted to go because I wanted to, practice on the World Championship course. And we couldn't find a place for a reasonable rate. Like it
Oh,
was so expensive that because my kind of, like I won't pay 250, $300 a night for. I can't.
I paid $20 a night.
Yeah, well, but you've also invested almost $1 million in your trailer when you talk
Yeah,
about.
right. That's what my wife is saying. But yeah, and I was the first night there was only one other person there. The second night I was the only one there.
The only one, were you in a campground?
Well, it was a campground, but they were redoing it, so they weren't really advertising that they had camping available. So really, I just had a spot, which was fine, and I had no problem with that at all. So I was the only one there.
Wow. Yeah, and $20 a night.
What's
And
that?
and $20 a night.
$20 a night.
And you could sleep in because it didn't get light in your trailer till 8 o'clock. I mean, it's a
That's right.
win-win.
And it was just a little cold.
So, we've never discussed this. How is the heat situation in your trailer? I know you've got a little heater.
Well, let me put it this way. My wife wants me to have like a CO2 monitor and things like that, and I'm like, this trailer is not hermetically sealed. This trailer is a little drafty inside, so it doesn't matter. So,
So 2 meters going off on the inside, we have problems because the is going off on the outside too.
but it's a little chilly, but that's okay. It was just a little more blankets and a beanie, and it's all
Right?
good.
You can always put more clothes on, right?
That's right. And I just, turn the oven on and, bake something, and that actually helps a lot. So
Put a pizza in the oven and call it a night.
that's right.
That sounds
No,
good, right?
totally. Put a loaf of bread in there, let it, bake that, and it actually is a nice way to heat the trailer and get some food out of it too. So,
Oh, that's so awesome. Well, I'm
uh,
glad you were able to get out there, and we were talking a little bit off the air. You rode a little bit of
yep,
the World Championship course.
yep. I did the 37-mile loop that includes Gunlock, Vail, and then back down through Snow Canyon. So I started and ended at the bottom of Snow Canyon. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's a nice ride.
it's going to be a doozy. That's for sure.
Got to be patient, and like we talked about before, I just kept telling myself on race day, well, it's not even a race for me. It's just I'm really just going for the completion. My just don't have the fitness to do any type of racing, but just don't be a hero early in the race because you'll pay the price. That's
Well,
for
it's so
sure.
interesting, right? Because there's two climbs early in
Yeah,
that, they're only a mile and a half or so each. But man, you could ruin your whole day.
yeah, it
Like
could.
in the first 20 miles, you could ruin your day.
Yeah,
And you're right. It's gonna take a lot of patience.
yeah, and
Now,
I haven't done the calculation what I'm going to shoot for time wise, but it could be a 7 hour bike ride, and so this is going to be the other part that's going to change everything in terms of nutrition. I mean, you're easily adding an hour, maybe even 2 hours to your Ironman bike time.
I've ran a little bit of the numbers, and I'm still teetering on exactly where I'm going to be. But for example, at Ironman California, I was looking at a 440,
Mm-hmm.
445 bike split, like
Yep, yep.
if the weather would have been good. This, I'm really looking at 6 hours.
Yeah,
And
yeah, right.
think about that. That is an hour and 15 more minutes
That's
of
right.
effort at
Right.
the same effort level. Maybe I probably would have ridden a little harder.
Uh-huh.
You're still on your bike for, maybe 20% more time.
Yep,
And you're right, that's 20% more nutrition
yep,
that you've got to figure out. And then it's 20% more time in that position on the bike before you get off
yep.
and run. And, I think once again, I think it's going to be a really interesting race for sure because of
Yeah,
those.
well, and so we're in the same ballpark because for an Ironman right now, if I was trained and doing racing wise, I'd probably target anywhere from 5:15 to 5:30, and so I'm looking at 7 hours for St.
Yeah.
George. It's
It's funny,
so yeah, about that same type of adjustment. So
yeah.
yeah.
So that, the other thing I'm really thinking about, obviously we'll do a whole show on St. George, but the temperature swing,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
the water is going to be low 60s. The morning will be low 60s,
Hmm.
and we could easily see 100 degrees that day.
That's right.
And
That's a great point.
so a 40-degree temperature swing, that's a big swing.
Yeah. No, you're right. In fact, in May, typically we go up and do the Sand Hollow race.
Yep.
And there have been some, and that's usually right around mid-May. And there have been some cold swims for Sand Hollow. I mean, cold to the point that, people would say you didn't feel your feet until you're, almost done with the 10K portion of the Olympic run. I mean, it can be really cold coming out of that water. And so you're right. But now you stretch that out for an all day, and then you're even going to get into the dark hours,
Yeah, and
for
it'll
the
get cold again
finish.
as soon as we know
Yeah,
in the desert. As soon as the sun goes down,
yeah.
yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Now the good news is because the time of year, it probably won't get dark now till 9 o'clock there.
Yeah, that's okay. That's right.
Still, you're going to have people
That's right,
that
because it's the hour. Yeah, that's right.
you still have people that are going to be finishing after that, and maybe out there on the run course for 3 more hours in the dark. That's
Well, it
gonna,
takes me back to the old Silverman days. Silverman Full. I remember that was in November, and I remember trying to pack for like special needs on the run. And at that point, I'm saying, it's going to be dark. It's going to be potentially cold. So I got to put in a hat. I got to put in a jacket. Whatever it is. Because at that point, I'm probably not moving very fast even. And and so now you got to prepare for a whole different. You're right. You really got three stages of climates that we're going to be going through with this St. George race. Early in the morning, cold. Midday could be super hot, and then evening could be cool again.
yeah, and obviously it's too far out, and it could be super windy.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're hoping that that's not the case. So, but anyways, we're talking about this because we're talking about today. We're going to be talking about long running and the benefits of that, and long bike rides and the benefits of those. As I started to think about this 6.5 hour, 6 hour bike ride, I've been trying to really wrap my head around like how do I prepare in different to other times, or maybe something I guess similarly. And I was starting to think about the benefits and the
Hmm.
costs of training long. So John, I know you've always kind of professed that you like to do, I think it's 300-mile rides before an Ironman.
Yeah, three 100-mile rides. I always like that.
Yeah.
And that was a nice sort of model for me personally. And truly, there's most of this is all based on anecdotes. It's so hard to do research on this long distance part of a training program. But my anecdote was that first 100 miles, I just get it done. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I can do 100 miles. That's great. The second 100-mile ride would give me a little bit more of a chance to try something out. And then by the third time that I would do 100 miles, I'd be like, oh, this is nothing. I've got this. And so mentally, it actually was really helpful for me to sort of progress that way. Not necessarily physically, but definitely mentally.
So John, but there is physical gains to be had and physiologic
Mhm.
gains to be had by going along like this. So, I mean, when you went from, let's say the first one, and this is probably over a month, right? Or a month and a half.
Yeah, probably about a month and a half is about right. Yeah,
So when you went from the first one to the last one, I would contend that you actually did change
that's right.
physiologically,
That's right.
right?
Hmm.
And so there are benefits to, to the long ride that are more than just mental, right? So it's interesting when I looked earlier this week into some of the research on it, we're seeing even benefits with long rides, VO2 and
Yeah.
VO2 max and power, percentage of VO2 max being used at certain powers. We're
Hmm.
seeing gains in FTP. We're seeing gains in fat oxidation rates,
Yep.
um, pedaling efficiency.
Hmm.
So these are all possible benefits that are occurring. Plus, I do strongly believe in the mental side, right? Like
Yeah.
something on that special happens when your bike computer goes from 99 to 100.
That's right.
It does something. I don't know about you, but I always get a little smile, and I always want to see that tick over, kind of
Yeah.
like the old odometer in a car when you want to see, hey, it hit 50,000 miles.
Yeah.
And yet and there's a different sense of accomplishment of doing a 100-mile ride compared to doing a 95-mile ride.
Hmm. Well, I love this, and I love your list of benefits, and we need to go back through and really identify them each. But it's interesting. We've got long swim, long bike, and long run that will, you're right, they all have these physical benefits. Physiologically, you can benefit. They're all going to have a cost. And the cost is almost a little bit different for each one. So I don't know where you want to start.
Well, I want to start. I don't, maybe because I don't really enjoy long swimming. I, um, I I don't see a lot of people doing long swims.
No,
I think that you might do 4,000 in the pool broken up into 200s.
yeah, yeah.
Very rarely do we see people do like a 4,000 straight.
Mm-hmm.
But it might be a longer session, right? So it might be 4,000, 5,000. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I've never approached it personally like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for me, getting up to 4,000 in a session is pretty much my long.
All right.
And I don't, maybe because it doesn't physiologically destroy me. The long run and the long bike do. It's not as, I don't know, it's not as much of a momentous occasion.
Well, okay, so let's see. Well, maybe we need to define the long distance,
Yeah.
what we mean by that, because you're right. And for swimming, I think you're spot on. I don't think a lot of people do that type of long distance swim, like a 2,000, straight 2,000, 3,000, or even 4,000 in the pool.
Yep.
But we see people all the time go down the lake and do an hour swim
Yep.
or a 30-minute swim. That would be what we would, or what we're putting into this bin of what we would call long distance session. So I don't know. I quickly wrote down this definition for long. I put long run, but it could be long bike. Anything substantially longer than your typical run or bike or swim. That's so terrible.
No, I know, but I like it because if you think about if you took your average, let's say the
Mm.
last 2 weeks, let's say your
Yep.
average, well, we can start with swim. Your average swim is 3,000, and then on one Saturday you do a 5,000.
Yeah,
That's your long swim, and it's the
that's
same
right.
with the run, right? Like if you once again you average it out and you do your average run is a 10K, and then on a Saturday you do your 20.
Yeah.
That's your long. So I
Yep.
think that I
And I
think
think Jack Daniels, I did find a formula from Jack Daniels, and he said something along the range. And Jack Daniels was a good researcher and coach, and
yeah,
he went with something 30% longer than your weekly mileage,
yeah,
which I like that for running. And we're talking about something probably usually longer than an hour, although for a swim, I would say a 30-minute straight swim. If you go and do that down the lake, that would still put in that bin of what a long session would be.
yeah.
Let's see. Okay. And then the other thing I wrote down that we probably need to define is the pace that we're doing these at.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? There is some really good stuff coming out and research, particularly on this, where it's not, it's variable. Like it
Yeah.
depends on, once again, it depends on your goal.
I wrote that. Those are my notes. I should screen share. That's exactly
Yeah.
what I wrote down. It depends on your goal.
If once again, if your goal, let's say in a triathlon, which this is a triathlon show, if your goal is to finish, then just doing the mileage might be the thing.
That's right.
If your goal is to win your age group or qualify for
Really
a
different.
world championship, it's probably different. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I've been reading a lot on keeps coming up is doing like negative split long runs, negative split bikes, where you finish strong.
Yeah.
And it's I call them progression runs or progression rides, where let's say a 5-hour bike ride, every hour you actually go a little bit harder,
Yeah.
or you go 2 or 3 hours easy, and then the last hour you do interval. And we're seeing that for people that want to be faster, that impetus, at least what the research is starting to show is, it seems to be, I don't know what's coming up lately.
Yeah.
If you're seeing some of the same stuff.
Yeah. I like this approach. I like really anytime that you are forcing yourself to try a different pace.
Yeah.
I like that because far too often we just settle into a pace, and that pace may not be the best pace to elicit a training response. And so you don't know if there's another good pace for you unless you go and explore them. And I really like the idea of doing a negative split, because I think that forces us to purposefully start off easy and then work towards something hard, as opposed to working hard and then suffering the consequences with that, and then trying to deal with the fatigue that we would have. Although I think that's a good thing to do, especially when you're doing these long distance events. You got to figure out how to run when you're fatigued, but at the same time you've got to explore these different paces. So I like this negative split type of idea. Push the limits and see what you can do.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, and you brought up the training response, because ultimately our body responds to new stresses, right? And the example I like is, I think we've talked about this before, but I have a friend of a friend, story, who rides his bike 100K. He's in Canada, 100K every day. Every day. He's in Victoria, so he can, on the coast, he can do it. And so I follow him on Strava. He rides the same route every day. One time he goes clockwise, next time counterclockwise.
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't get any better.
Mm-hmm.
He does basically the same speed, same power, same everything. But you think about it, man, this guy rides, it's 60 miles every day.
Yep.
I think he would just keep getting better and better, but he is the same. He's plateaued.
Yep.
And not that he's not a good cyclist, like, because that's, to be able to do that is good, and he's got obviously some good stamina, but he's not improving, and the body needs new stresses to improve. So when we talk about long runs, long rides, long swims, we either need to make the time longer, or we need to increase the intensity.
Right.
And I would contend when we do it, we have to be very careful, because we're already getting close oftentimes to the breaking point when we're doing these things. But for getting ready to do a 100-mile ride, I would do one weekend a 60, then maybe next weekend a 70, and the next weekend an 80. What I would probably not advise is go from like that 60 to 100.
Yeah, right.
Right. Or when you're doing your 60 and you're doing zone 1 and 2 60, all of a sudden, hey, I want to go race pace for 60. Maybe do some tempos and do something in between, or do break down, do 20 minutes at race pace and then a little rest, 20 minutes at race pace. And, so we're still, watching that ramp rate, which we've talked about a lot, but there has to be an increase in the stimulus.
No, this is great. And I'm going to get to Bob's question here. He's posted, when doing your long run and swim, is there a point where you are tearing yourself down without a training effect or benefit? And this is exactly what we're talking about. And, that the old adage, especially in the running world, is too much change, too fast, too soon. And so when we start talking about this long distance training session, whether it's a swim, bike, or run, you can't have too much change too soon, too fast, but you need some change because this is Hans Selye's stress adaptation model. You've got to have a stress and then you adapt, but you also have to recover. And so too much change too soon, too fast is a bad thing. We have to really ramp up these long sessions. So
No, that's a perfect response. And to further answer Bob's question, it's and kind of the way I do it, or I like to do it, is go long first, and then increase the intensity. So if I go for an 80-mile bike ride or a 20-mile run, let's say, it's easy, especially the first couple times. It's easy, and then my next runs throughout that week will be shorter but more intensity. And then the next time I do my long run, or maybe once I feel like I've adapted, maybe I'll keep the same distance with that, and then I'll throw in a couple of Ks of faster speed. And it has to be very, in my opinion, very prescriptive in how you build these things. And we've mentioned this before, is just because you feel good on the day doesn't mean it's the right time to say, you know what, oh man, I know I ran 10 miles last week, but I'm feeling good today. I'm going to do 15 miles.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling really good, so I'm going to do it at a faster pace. I think that is where you tear yourself down quicker than you can rebuild it. Because once again, answering Bob's question, you'll always, if you're pushing the limits, you're always tearing yourself down to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But you just want to be careful, not too much, and that you do recover from the teardown. That
recovery is so important. So this is the other running adage that's always floating around. There's three kinds of runners: those who are injured, those who are recovering from an injury, and the third kind are those who will soon be injured.
Yeah.
So the whole, and what we're getting towards, we're really leaning towards the cost here of doing a long distance session, and in particular, a long distance run is the riskiest of the three sports. Is doing a long distance run, because that involves the impact with the ground. That's a lot to deal with your body. You've got to train yourself to have that and be able to deal with that. So we call that durability. But at the same point, you're always running the risk of getting an overuse injury when you start incorporating these long distance runs.
Every time you run, you're risking something.
No.
Even if it's a 5K short run, if you did not recover from the sessions before, there's a risk. Now, when there's not a risk, is good when you've recovered well and you're doing less or the same as you've done before. That's how you limit your risk, but then you don't ever get better.
Yeah.
So if you want to get better, sometimes, I hate to say this, but as an athletic trainer, I've seen it enough. You got to get injured.
Wait, explain this a little bit more.
Well, here's the thing: is if you want to be truly great at any sport, and what I mean by great is, being competitive with other people your age or your whatever class you're in or whatever, you got to push it to the edge. And sometimes you're going to go over that edge.
Yep.
And the mistake that we see in the world of athletic training is going too far over that edge and not recognizing you went over that edge.
Yep. And
that's when, a little injury turns into a long-term thing. And remember, your body doesn't know that there's an Ironman in 3 weeks. It just knows that you've pushed it too far, and it's breaking. And and you can be like, well, we all do this, and I'm guilty of it, is we, justify in ourselves, okay, well, if I'll just make it through these next 3 weeks,
Yeah, right.
and then I'll deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes back to John Mercer's #1 rule of triathlon racing, which is,
My consistency rule.
no, the #1 rule is get to the start line.
Oh yeah, get to the start line injury free. No, that you're spot on. That's how you're going to give your best chance of being successful on that day, is be injury free when you're towing that start line.
And so if that means 3 weeks out that you pull the plug a little bit,
Yep,
you're not going to lose that much fitness.
that's right. That's
We've
right.
talked about this before. If 3 weeks out you say, I'm going to start my taper now, and I'm going to take 2 or 3 days off, and maybe I'll just swim. I won't run. I won't bike, and you get that little extra recovery in there.
Mm-hmm.
I would contend that we would all do well, especially practicing for long distance, if about 3 weeks off, we took 3 days off.
Yeah.
And just had a little reset, and then your body gets a good chance to heal, and then you can actually start to heal the areas that are a problem, right? Because I think oftentimes with doing long distance training, we don't even recognize when we're injured, because we're always
that's right.
we're always a little sore. So you give yourself that 2 or 3 days,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, oh yeah, my hamstring's still sore. Everything else is good, but my hamstring is, well, maybe your hamstring's been injured all along, but you're just so sore everywhere else, you don't recognize it.
So I love this. So this cost of, and so we've got a long run or long bike, a long swim, and that is going to be relative to each person based upon their training program, and it's going to be relative based upon where you are in your training program. So a long run, maybe 10 miles right now, but maybe down the road, maybe it's 18 miles is a long run, and so forth. And so I think that's important for people to realize as we're talking about that. And the key here is ramping up carefully on any of these sports, running in particular, but then also the recovery. So now I want to throw in some other costs that I think add to the risk of being injured, whether that injury could be mental or physical. Time. I mean, now all of a sudden you've got, let's say you're going to go for a bike ride. We're, talking about St. George. Maybe a long bike ride is going to take you 6 hours or 7 hours.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's your whole day.
That's that, right. Prepping and afterwards.
Yeah. No, really think about that. Like, if you're going to go, let's say 7 hours, because I don't think that's out of the realms of possibilities for training for that course.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Let's say you leave your house at 7 a.m. All right, you're done at 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what do you feel like doing after 2?
Going for a run on a bike.
Yeah. So let's say we're crazy, and let's throw a half-hour brick run in because we're
yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Right. Then what? Sit on the couch and not do anything. And
that's right.
Your spouse wants to go do something. Hey, let's go to IKEA. And you know what you do? You say yes.
That's right. You have to.
Because you feel guilty that you were gone all day. So you say yes. Next thing you know, you're walking around IKEA. And then you're at IKEA and your wife says, we should go to Costco. And I always say yes. Right? And it's partly, it's an intrinsic guilt.
Yeah.
Right? And so the next thing you know, you're on your feet for 2 more hours.
Yeah, right.
Or you're crunched up in a car. You're not laid out. You're not, your feet aren't up.
Yeah, we're not professional triathletes. We don't have that. So yeah, no, totally. And so a 7-hour ride will take up your whole day, and it takes up the evening before.
Yeah, getting your stuff all ready. I'm getting ready. I have a 5-hour bike ride tomorrow. I'm meeting somebody early, and I've already started getting my stuff ready and make sure everything's ready. Yeah, you're right. It's already happening.
Yeah, right.
No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and now you also have, again, we're talking cost here of doing these long distance training sessions. You also have your supplies. These get costly.
Well, I don't know about you, John, but I skip lunch those days.
Well, that's true. My peanut butter and jelly sandwich doesn't cost a lot, but
it doesn't. That's what I'm saying. It's not like I'm going out on a sentence. Here's the thing. I have a not triathletes, and Sunday brunch is a thing, and it could be
Yeah,
a $30, $40 affair.
right.
So I'm winning. I don't have that 30 or 40.
There you go. All right. Well,
I may
that's a
have
benefit then.
I may have $5 worth of cookies, but
That's right.
I think that
Well,
might be a
that's the, you bike out to Searchlight, you go in and you buy like $10 worth of junk food.
yeah, I've done that before too, though. Yeah, but I try really hard now to bring everything I need
Yeah.
and not have to buy. My vice is a Coke. I'll go, find a Coke vending machine
Yeah,
somewhere.
yeah. Oh, that's right. You found one up in Charleston. I love
Yeah,
that. That's
I
so
bring my
cool.
6 quarters every time I go up there. But still, yeah, I don't see. I think that's a benefit of being out and
Okay, well, okay,
I'm not
and
online. I'm not online shopping, right?
well, I see Paul's watching, and Paul also attests to the value of long distance training is to be able to eat just about anything. So
Yeah, see, that's another benefit because when you get done and you have that quart of ice cream,
that's right. All right,
but
so maybe this is I don't know if this falls in the benefit or the cost category, but all right, so now another cost that could ultimately lead or contribute to overuse injuries is sleep.
yes. Oh,
So the night before, I don't know if you're the same way. I still get anxious when I know I've got a long session the next day. I don't sleep as well the night before. That's going to contribute to the potential for an overuse injury.
John, it's so funny because especially if I'm meeting somebody,
Yeah, that's right.
we're meeting at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock somewhere. I'm up 2 hours before because I don't want to I have this fear of being late.
Yeah,
I
right.
just don't like being late to things.
Mhm.
And it's probably why one of my anxieties, even like, oh, can't sleep the night before a race,
Mhm.
is that same thing. So no, I think you're right. And then we've talked about it before, but I also am of the belief that sleep is more important than training,
Mhm.
and if all else is equal, I'd rather start an hour later and sleep an hour more.
Right,
And
right.
if it's hot, if there's traffic,
Mhm.
or I get the reasons why people want to get up early and go, but especially the athletes, that are training 15, 20 hours a week,
Mhm.
that extra hour of sleep on a Sunday morning might just be the difference of you not getting injured.
Yeah, that's right.
And and I get it, like especially in Vegas, and as it gets hotter, you want to beat the heat, but I always look at it, oh, there's more adaptation happening.
Yeah, right, right. No, and I think this is an important thing to be thinking about when you're setting up these training programs. And you're right. When you're meeting up with other people, on one hand, that's a great benefit. In fact,
That's
someone messaged me and said, "Hey, you folks should do a podcast on the benefits of training with someone else." And I really believe that there is a benefit because you hold each other accountable, you encourage each other. It sort of sometimes gets you out of the door when you normally maybe you wouldn't. And so there's a lot of benefits there, but it can also add some stress too in terms of, for people like me who I train most of the time on my own. So when I have to meet someone, I'm like you, I want to be there early. I want to be there on time, ready to go. And so that adds a bit more stress, and stress is stress.
Yeah.
And so we're adding that type of stress onto a physical stress of doing a long distance session. So these are things that to really, for people to think about when they're planning these sessions out.
No, you're right on with that. And then I would contend also that the stress of meeting people is there, but then the other side, like you said, it's a benefit, right?
Yeah,
'Cause,
yeah,
like, I know for my ride tomorrow, I'm riding with an old friend and we will probably chat for a lot of the
yeah.
time.
Right,
And
right.
that 5 hours will go a lot quicker than if it was 5 hours by myself.
Yeah.
Like mentally, and not that it'll go quicker, but
Mhm.
mentally, it'll be easier mentally because I won't be thinking of constantly looking at my bike computer going, oh man, I still got another bit. We'll just be, we'll be chatting.
Yeah, yeah,
And so yeah, that's a difficult one.
yeah.
Now, if you're riding with somebody or riding with somebody you don't like, yeah,
Hmm.
that's a problem.
There you go. That's
That's
right.
this
And
person.
and riding with a group though is so much fun. When we went out and did Corn Creek,
Yep.
just meeting with people and seeing them and not necessarily riding with them, but being together with them, you sort of share that camaraderie with them. And, we've gone up with, Rick's group up at, Nellis, and those are just fun, sort of share stories afterwards. And, that can make it really an enjoyable part of your training program. So there's a lot of benefits to that, but things to
Let's
be
talk
thinking
about the long run and running with somebody and
of.
the cost benefit on that. So I think that it could be beneficial because you have someone to maybe chat with along the way, but it could be harmful if you go too fast because the person you're running with is a little bit faster than you.
No. Oh, that's true. And there's this other part that there's what's called entrainment, where sometimes you start running similar to what the other person is running at, especially with cadence, or they do, vice versa, or you find that cadence where you're both, close to the same cadence as opposed to being on these different cadence. That naturally happens. There's some really neat entrainment type of research.
And it can happen quick. So
Yeah.
that happened to me today. So I
Oh,
was
really?
running today, and I was running along a sidewalk. I previewed the Oceanside run course today, so I did one loop of it.
Okay.
I'm running behind this guy, and I'm slowly catching him.
Mm-hmm.
And as I get about 20 yards away, I noticed I slowed down to his pace.
Interesting.
I was running his cadence. I was watching him run,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and it's like I'm like, how come I'm not progressing anymore
Mm-hmm.
on him? Did he speed up? He has no idea I'm there.
Yeah, right.
I don't think he's sped up, but I'm sure that I slowed down and started running to his cadence. It happens
Interesting.
very quickly.
Yeah.
So then mentally I have to say, okay, I got to pass this guy. So the next intersection, I'm like, by the next intersection, I'm gonna pass him.
Mm-hmm.
And then I never saw him again. But it's really an interesting thing, and especially if you run with somebody that runs with a
Mm-hmm.
really slow cadence and you have a fast cadence, you definitely will bring your
Yeah.
cadence down.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I've never really thought of it quite like that, but it literally happened to me today.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. And it can happen even when you're listening to music and you start running to, or even cycling at a beat. Maybe a little bit with swimming, but people don't listen to music as much in swimming. But there's some waterproof pods out there. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so
Right.
should we talk about some of the physiologic benefits? I know I briefly talked about them.
Yeah,
Or
yeah. So let's see. Let me just check comments here. Oh, well, good luck to those doing Havasu tomorrow. So Max says he's doing that, so he's going to listen to us later. Paul says, yeah, he likes the three kind of runners. Yeah, and there's two kinds of cyclists: those who have crashed and those who are going to.
yep.
And Matt says, hey, I need to train with you guys. 5 a.m. start. Matt is notorious for doing. This is Matt Nealon. For doing early morning workouts. So that's great.
Well, if he's doing a 7-hour ride, he can meet me around 8 o'clock, and I'll catch the back
There you
half.
go. I love it. Okay, yeah, let's do benefits.
So I think the number one benefit is gaining fitness, right?
Oh,
Whether that's strength, whether that is aerobic development, you will by extending yourself and getting once again out of that comfort zone, you'll gain fitness, and there's many different pieces that we can gain. So I mentioned a few already, but without getting into the weeds, you will become a fitter athlete,
mm-hmm.
and you'll become, if you don't break, you'll become more resilient
Right.
of an athlete. And I think for triathletes in particular, I think resiliency is often overlooked.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
It's
interesting you use resiliency. I use the term durability, but we mean the same thing. And that's actually my number one benefit of these types of workouts is the durability or the resiliency. I think that is so critical.
Yeah, and that resiliency or durability gets built over long
Mm-hmm.
time,
Yeah.
right? This is not something you build up in a season or a year or even a couple of years. This is potentially decades in the making. And every time you extend yourself and you go a little bit longer than you had previously gone, or a little bit longer than you've gone that season, or wherever you're at, you build that resiliency.
Mm-hmm.
We've all felt, the delayed onset muscle soreness after we had a long run, right? Or a little bit of a fast run. But the more you do it, the less you get, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the signs that you're kind of plateauing is when you do go for that long run, it's mostly on the run, you don't feel sore.
Yeah.
Right. And the next day you're fresh as a daisy. Well, that tells you when you're doing your long run, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're fresh as a daisy the next day, you could go further. You
Yeah.
can go longer, or you could go faster. I feel it on the bike personally, that resiliency. If I've been constantly going 3 or 4 hours and I extend to 5, that last hour is a challenge to me, and I'm a little bit weaker, a little bit sore. Then the next time I do it, I'm not so weak, I'm not so sore.
Yeah.
Uh, and we've talked about durability in triathlon before, but I contend that having that durability, especially on the bike, makes the run so much better.
Yep.
If you get off the bike and you feel somewhat fresh, the run is just, I don't know, it's a different sport almost. Where you get off the bike and you're spent, it's a long, miserable run.
Yeah, no, and I think you're right. And not only that, but also having good swim fitness,
Yep.
then be having a good bike fitness, and then by the time you get to the run, you are ready to run, as opposed to, having to already burn the matches, as we say, either in the swim or the bike.
So one of the things that I did, for many years, my distance of choice was 70.3, and I want to get back to that after this nonsense of doing Ironman, because this is nonsense.
Yeah,
But one of the things that I always tried to do was ride the time I was going to race.
yeah, I like that rule. That's a good one.
So if it was a 4.5 hour, 5 hour time-ish, I was gonna race. I wanted to be able to ride that distance and at the end not feel completely dead.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And because I was like, well, if I'm going to race for 4.5, 5 hours, why can't I do that? And I just build up that durability of my cardiovascular system as a whole
Mm-hmm.
all that time without doing a swim, bike, and then a run. Because
Right.
nobody's going to train, well, maybe some people would, 1.2 mile swim, 56-mile bike, and a 13.1 mile run
Mm-hmm.
on any given Sunday. But you could easily build yourself up to ride for 4.5, 5 hours.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And or I would do a 4 hour with a half-hour break or whatever. That was always one of my kind of key workouts was to do that on a weekend.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great workout, and I think it's great advice to for people to think about if if that's your target time, to be able to do that on the bike, because you're right. If you can't do the fitness on the bike for that time, it's not going to be easy to do it with a swim on a bike or a swim on a run too.
And we've talked about it already, but the bike doesn't beat you up nearly as much,
Right.
right? The cost benefit analysis, and we've talked a little bit about this before, where our heart and lungs, it doesn't know any different between biking and running or swimming, right? So if I can sit at zone 2 for 4.5 hours, that is cardiovascularly the same as me doing a full or 70.3 at zone 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's an important distinction. And I know, like, a lot of people, when they get into doing 70.3 racing, they just build up to the point where they can ride 56 miles.
Yeah.
And
Right.
but if that 56 miles devastates you,
Mm-hmm.
how good are you going to be when you start your run?
Yeah. No, I like that a lot. That's a good one. All right, so now durability. You've mentioned this. It's the bones, it's the muscles, it's the tendons,
Yep.
and the physiology, the changes to cardiovascular system. Then there's also the stride or biking technique or even swim technique
Efficiency.
will change as you do these long distance events or long distance training sessions.
Yeah. So actually, let me ask you this question, John. If you could, when you build your training plan, and obviously I know your training plan a little bit, would you prefer to bike long on Saturday or run long on Saturday?
Well,
Listen,
yeah, well, I'm doing it backwards and I should do it the other way, but I do my long run on Saturday and then my long bike on Sunday. But I know a
you
lot
do
of
it the
people
right
don't do
way. You do it the right way.
it. Oh, yeah, okay.
I think you saying you do it backwards is backwards.
No, good. All right, well, that's good. That's affirmation then.
Because I feel like your long run, because it's the most dangerous.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly why I do my long run on Saturdays. I'm trying to reduce the risk to injury.
It needs to be done with less fatigue in your system.
Yeah.
Like if you think about it, if you did a 100-mile bike ride on Saturday, and then you're like, oh, yeah, I'm going to do a 20-mile run on Sunday.
Yeah.
You'll be fatigued. Now, I know there are people that say, yes, you want that because you want to run fatigue.
Right.
Oh, sure you do. That's
But
how
we're
you
not professional triathletes either. And
exactly.
we're not in our 20s anymore either.
And I would say that if I was in my 20s and I
Yeah.
was a professional triathlete, I would do it the other way.
Yep.
But I would say that a master level athlete like we are, we really should do it the exact way you do it. And that's and I'll believe that forever because and it really has to do with injury risk reduction.
That's right. That's right. Totally.
Because that's more important to me than this physiologic thing of me running, increasing. I guess they say it's increasing your running efficiency while fatigued.
Get to the start line healthy.
It's the.
That's always been.
I'm so glad you said that, but I'm sad you said you're doing it wrong.
No. And so now we know that your stride, I'll focus on running because we've done more research on running. We know your stride characteristics will change as you do these long distance runs. And really what's happening is your body is trying to figure out the most economical way to run. And so that's a benefit mechanically really to doing these long runs. So I say do these long runs on a variety of surfaces even. Not, I wouldn't go do a 13-mile run on grass or sand or something that you've never done anything. But as you do your 13-mile run, don't avoid a 100-yard patch of grass or don't avoid, different surfaces. It's okay.
It's so funny when I do my long runs, especially if I'm somewhere where I know, like near my house, I will purposely get to like a soccer field and run around it 4 times.
Yeah, yeah.
Get back on the tarmac. Like I'll do that. I do that all the time. And I do it for that exact reason. So no, John, I think you're spot on with that. The other thing that I think is really a benefit is breaking these runs. And if it's, let's say you're going to run for an hour 20, 4 20-minute blocks with just 2 or 3 minutes of walking or doing some dynamic exercise. And we talked about this before in between. Once again, your body doesn't know any different, but every time you restart that run, you've actually decreased a little bit of that fatigue. You have your body kind of resets itself a little bit. And it's not, I'm not saying sit down and do nothing for that amount of time. Just stay moving, do some stretching, kind of dynamic movements. And I wouldn't say stretching, dynamic movements, and then get back going. Like I always think it's really interesting. Like you see, you can always tell an ultra runner, right? Because they got the vest on and they get to a stoplight and they're running.
Right.
Like you're probably out here for 4 hours.
Right.
At least you get the gear for a 4-hour run. What difference does it make if you stop at this light for a minute and just reset?
Well, and thinking about, an iron distance event, a lot of people will have the run strategy of, run to each aid station and walk the aid stations. You got to practice that because at some point when you start walking, if you're not ready, your brain will not want you to run again. So you got to practice going from a walk to a run.
Yeah, you might cramp up.
Yeah.
No, you're right with that. And so I'm a big believer of broken runs, run walks, splitting it up into manageable portions. And mentally, I think it's way easier too. Yeah. If I know I've got to do 4 20-minute runs with even a 5-minute little break in between, it's easier mentally for me than doing an hour 20 run. I don't know about you if you've ever.
I think so. I like that. All right, now I'm gonna throw a little bit of a curveball in here for benefits.
I love it.
Exploring new areas and routes, and you're famous for this. I mean, you're Strava. I mean, you've almost got Vegas covered here.
It's so funny. For a while out there, my goal was actually to say I was going to get every street in Vegas, but then I realized that's an impossible dream.
You can't keep up.
You got to keep building them faster, and then nobody likes when you're riding along, and all of a sudden you get to a cul-de-sac and you got to turn around and come back. But you're right with that. Like I'm infamous with it for this because one of the reasons I'm in San Diego is to ride new routes.
Yeah.
And like this is like home away from home for me now. I feel like I'm a local down here because I come down here so often.
That's great.
I was looking at my Strava for down here, and it's getting pretty filled up of all the big roads. But it's amazing, like when I find a new road, and it's like, oh, man, I found a couple on this trip. that were just like butter smooth,
Oh,
perfect time trial. I'm like, how did I not know about this road before? And that's one of the benefits, especially in California. There's so many roads. Like in Southern Nevada, really for good, like especially training, we don't have that many roads. The roads we have
oh,
are spectacular
yeah.
and they're good, but there's not a ton of variety.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, I wonder if I counted how many times I've been out to Blue Diamond and back.
Oh, I know. I know. That's yeah.
It's got to be over 100.
Well, and so this is nice, and my wife is like that too. She loves to go exploring on her long rides,
Yeah.
and a lot of times she'll say, "Well, I'm going to go exploring," and I'm like, "Okay, I'll see you when I'm going to go right. You're going to go left," because I'm notorious for doing the same route over and over and over and over and over again, and so it's just sort of funny how we're on different ends of the spectrum, but it
Do,
is fun at the same time when you go and you do a long run or you do a long bike and you go explore an entirely new area that you haven't been to. I mean, that's why I actually love riding the Searchlight. I enjoy that. I love riding out to Redstone Park, which is out on North Shore Boulevard, and just explore a whole new area.
yeah, there's something about it mentally too, right? When your mind is working differently when you're exploring.
Yep.
You're having that inquisitive part. Marie always asks me, especially when I'm exploring, well, did you see anything fun today?
Did you see
And
what?
see anything fun?
Yep.
Like when you're out riding, did you see anything?
Yeah, yeah, right, right.
And so yesterday, I did a pretty long ride out to a town called Ramona,
Hmm.
and a lot of the roads I've been on before, but I'm riding along up this hill, and I look to my right and I see this dinosaur painting, and
Hmm.
or no, it was a dragon, and it was
Okay.
a dragon fruit farm,
Yep.
and I'm like, oh, that's
Hmm.
cool, dragon
Yeah.
fruit farm. I've never
Yeah.
ever seen a dragon fruit farm.
No.
Stop for a second. I just look, I've never even seen the plants before. I've never been to areas that had that. I'm like, okay, cool. Like that's new.
Yeah.
And I get home and she's like, see anything fun? I'm like, a dragon fruit farm. And she's like, really? I'm like, yeah. She's like, did you buy any? I'm like, I really couldn't carry back with me on my bike ride, but like to me, that's
Yep.
you know, I don't know, the way my mind works, like just seeing new things like that
Yeah.
is it makes the training better.
No, that's right. And when I was up in St. George, I did that loop. I came across that city Vale. I think it's Vale. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. And there's Vale pies. And I
Yeah,
was
it's
like,
famous, world
oh,
famous.
world famous. And so I'm like, oh. So I finished the ride and I got in the car and I went up and got a couple pieces of pie. And in there, you know, there you have a map of people putting push pins where they came from. And people come from all over the world to
Yeah.
get that. And that new to me. And I only found that because of doing a long ride and exploring a new area. So I think this is a benefit of these long sessions. And so I think part of mentioning that because when you're planning these out, don't you don't have they don't have to be painful and repetitive. You don't have to go to the track and do hundreds of loops on a track. You can, although jackpot ultra people love doing that, so it's a whole other.
Well, there's something about like every now and then of just being able to turn your mind off too. So like
Yeah,
often at UNLV, I'll jump onto the track and I'll do a 10K on the track
yeah, yeah,
just so I literally don't have to think,
yeah,
right?
that's right.
Because I also really like running to the Siegfried and Roy Park. Um,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I can do a 10K loop that way, and I really enjoy that. But I
Mm-hmm.
got to think,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And so sometimes it's nice to turn your brain off.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and even on the trainer, in more in the winter when I ride more on the trainer, sometimes it's nice just to just turn your brain off.
Yeah, that's
You
right.
know, I get on Zwift and I'll say, you know what, just set the erg mode to 180
All right.
watts and just sit there for a couple hours and not think
Yeah,
about it.
that's right. Maybe watch a movie or
Watching a
something,
movie.
or
Yep.
something. And
Yep.
Bob, I love this comment. I've been doing a lot of hiking and running on the flats, and slight downgrades keeps me from being injured. And yeah, hiking I think is a great way to do some of these long sessions,
Yep.
especially when you hike up and down a hill. That downhill is going to give you a lot of that durability training that we talked about early on.
So the one thing I'm going to add into that is, and we've talked about this before as well, is remember a long hike is not your off day.
No, right, right. It's
Because
part of your training session.
like, and I contend that hiking is one of the best things you can do to train, and especially if you put it, I actually really enjoy doing it at the end of a run.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you go 10K running and then hike for an hour.
Yeah.
Once your body is at that point where it's fatigued, you're going to get a lot of benefit out of it, but there's very little risk.
Right. That's right.
And we've talked about this a lot. A lot of this is mitigating risk.
Mm-hmm. All right. And Bob is giving you credit for that. He said, Ted told me about that. So that's awesome. So thank you. Thank you, Bob. All right. And then, a whole nother category. Where are we? We're 55 minutes here. Nutrition.
Oh man.
It's we talked a little bit about nutrition in terms of you get to use a lot of calories on these long sessions, so you can have a lot of fun eating things that you probably shouldn't. But now you got the whole idea of doing these. Well, a whole idea of doing these long sessions is to practice your nutrition.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And we often in the triathlon world get into this, well, I can do that whole ride on 2 Cliff Bars.
Yeah, right.
But should you?
Yeah. Mm-mm.
Right?
Mm-mm.
Because, especially when you're going long, like 4 or 5 hours, you can easily go through 3,000 calories,
Yeah.
4,000 calories. And if you're only replenishing 200 or 300 calories, yeah, you're burning a lot of fat, but the stress on your body is so great. And we haven't talked much about this, but I don't want to get into too deep on this, but your endocrine system.
Yeah, right.
Because you will be dumping cortisol, stress hormone, the entire time to basically fuel yourself. You'll be dumping glucagon to squeeze the last bit of sugar out of your liver.
Yeah.
And you don't really want to be stressing your body out that much in any given day. A lot of the research says that more than a 500 calorie deficit a day is extremely hard on these systems of your body.
Mm-hmm.
And so really thinking about the fueling during these long sessions it's beneficial for you training, like as far as like getting ready for a race and bringing in nutrition, but it's also just beneficial for you recovering, not overstressing those systems of your body.
Oh, that's great. And I think the phrase that's really caught on, especially these last 3 to 5 years, I've heard it a lot more, is energy availability.
Yep.
And being sure that you're fueling so that you have energy and you're going to get a better training response because you're going to be training better. And even for people who are trying to lose weight or change body composition, still having energy availability is a good thing. And you don't need that big of a deficit because the weight that you're going to try to lose has to be over a long period of time. You can't do it in a short period of time.
The research is pretty good on this. If you go into these big debts, like 2,000 calories a day, even for one day,
Yeah.
your thyroid was one of the things that'll get hit first. And so then your metabolism will drop and you won't lose the weight you think you're going to lose.
Mm-hmm.
And so you might as well fuel yourself. You're still going to lose, and you're still going to be in a calorie deficit on these long sessions. But I couldn't push the calories enough. And I used to be that guy that would fly and like go 5 hours on 2 Cliff Bars or 2 cookies. Like that. You can do it, but there's a cost, and a big cost.
Well, when I passed that Veo pie shop, I was thinking about going in and getting a piece of pie and then continuing the bike ride, but I pushed on.
I think you would have won. That would have been.
Well, someone said, David posted a comment. I guess there's a bike ride that happens up there, and I guess the pies, they give out pies for free for an aid station. I'm like, oh my goodness, that's a bike ride that we got to do.
I've done the tour of St. George, and it goes right by that pie shop.
I think that's the one he mentioned. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm a gluten-free person, so I've never partaken, but yes.
All right, and so I'm gonna let's see. We got one more comment here on the nutrition. Paul says, "I found I need about twice the calorie intake than I anticipated in the last race." Yeah, it's trying to get that number of calorie down. Get the total calories that you need is so important. That's why these long sessions are important. but then also the rate of calorie that you're going to take in. Those are really two things that you've got to practice on these long runs and long bike rides is the amount of calories and the rate to take them in.
Agreed.
Oh,
Awesome.
wow, this has been fun. I'm motivated. I want to go do a nice long ride or a run tomorrow.
All right. Hopefully you don't have to meet someone too early.
Yeah. Well, I gotta look at the weather. I'm done with biking in the cold. I need to
All
do.
right. All right.
I'm
Go
ready
say
for
that.
warm weather.
Be careful what you wish for, because you know before long it's going to be too.
I know it, all of a sudden it will be hot here. Well,
Well,
you enjoy San Diego.
all right. Yeah. And you have a great weekend, and we'll talk next week.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and good luck to everyone doing Havasu.
Yep. Good. Have a good race.